The GH5, a legend, a classic, a vintage, but it is revolutionary. It was revolutionary when it first came out. One of the first ever cameras to bring 4K for a good price to the masses, and it featured pro features left, right, and center. This was the peak of Micro Four Thirds. At this point in time, there was a huge movement behind it, and a lot of people were like, yeah, Micro Four Thirds is king for this reason. Of course, sentiments have since changed, and years have since passed since the GH4 came out. So the question is it still worth it in 2021? Let's start off with the image quality, because that's the most important. The image quality of the GH4 is good. Photos, videos, you name it, you got it. They look great on the GH4. It's got a 16 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor, which unfortunately isn't stabilized, but it is wonderfully sharp and you get lovely images. Great for portraits and landscapes. It doesn't have great autofocus, unfortunately, this little sensor, because it's contrast detect. But for portraits, landscapes, for photos that don't really need the fastest autofocus and action, it works plenty good. And the 16 megapixels look great and the images look lovely, as you can see on the screen right now. In terms of the video quality, there is no debate. The GH4 looks wonderful, and if you say otherwise, you're wrong. The GH4 can do 4K 30p or 1080p up to 60 fps at 200 megabits per second. And if you want a 10-bit 4K, you can do 10-bit 422 to an external ProRes recorder like the Atomos Ninja over HDMI, which is insane because this camera came out 5 to 6 years ago. And that's a feature that still isn't found on Sony cameras that came out recently. I'm looking at you, A7C, and you alone. So yeah, if you're asking whether the image quality of this camera is good enough, well, that's your answer. It looks wonderful. You can shoot short films with it even to this day. You can do a lot of things with it even to this day. It is a potent, powerful, wonderful beast of a camera, unless you need autofocus. The autofocus is atrocious. It will never make it in a million years, for video at least. Let's talk about its design and ergonomics. Even though it's an older camera, its ergonomics I think are still better than many modern cameras. Its grip is a great balance. It's not too thick and chunky like the 5D or the EOS R, but it's also not too skinny like the Sony A7C. It's a great balance and it feels comfortable. It feels like I can hold it for hours on end without any concerns, and it definitely is a comfortable camera to use. You've got dedicated buttons for everything, plenty of function buttons. You've got white balance, ISO, shutter speed, everything easily laid out. You can quickly switch between your focus modes and your drive modes. The mode dial is locking, which is my kind of mode dial, and you've got 3 dials for switching shutter speed, ISO, and white balance and aperture on the fly really easily, just like that. And that is honestly wonderful. On top of that, the ergonomics and the usability of the menus are wonderful. You've got a flip out screen, so if you want to vlog or make YouTube videos, you can. And the menu is touchscreen. Everything is fully touchscreen. If you want to control it, it's really easy. Just tap on the screen like a smartphone. Something that Sony still hasn't figured out until very recently. The battery life of this is excellent. It can shoot for days on an end. Okay, not days, but it can shoot for many hours at an end and last and do and perform like a thoroughbred racehorse without missing a beat. The battery life is immense on these, and the battery used in this camera has been used on the GH5 and GH3, so it's actually very easy to get your hands on the battery that the GH4 uses. So as a result, it's cheap to get extras if you're worried about battery life. I personally could use this for a full day shoot without any concerns of battery. That is excellent. The build quality is wonderful of this camera as well. It was a pro camera, so it's got pretty good weather sealing. It's built like a tank and it really feels solid. Even the flaps, the crappy flaps that hide the very convenient mic and headphone jacks, are pretty well built. Like, they feel pretty nice in your hand, and that is awesome. So we've gotten the positives out of the way. In all aspects, it really still performs very well even to this day. Cameras haven't really been exploding in terms of its progress. So let's talk about the possible cons. If you wanted to, say, put this on a gimbal, you're most likely going to be relying on autofocus. And this camera does not have good autofocus. It is a contrast detect kind of system, and that means its autofocus is really not that good. It's nothing to write home about. In photos, it's perfectly fine for anything but sports photography, but for videos, it will never make it in a million years. It struggles, it hunts, and it really isn't a good idea to use autofocus for video on this camera. You could, but it's not a good idea. Another drawback of this camera is that it's old, so it lacks IBIS and more modern features like dual SD card slots. IBIS is a big concern, I think, for a lot of people, because increasingly minimalist shooting is kind of the way everyone is going. You know, we want to keep our kit light. We want to be able to go as far as we can without worrying about weight. So a heavy gear, having to bring a gimbal or some sort of stabilizer along, not a good idea. So there's no IBIS. You want to use optically image stabilized lenses as much as possible, and if you can't, make sure you've got a gimbal or some sort of tripod if you want to get stable video. I personally am okay with the lack of IBIS for its price, but someone might care. It doesn't have dual SD card slots too, which is essential for pro work, but I personally am not too worried or faffed about it. Like, I haven't had an SD card fail on me, but if you are concerned, then you have to be aware of that. But now back to more advantages. It's a micro four thirds mount, which means cheap lenses and accessories. It is tiny because of the tiny sensor, and because it's old, its price is wonderful. I got this camera for 400 Singapore dollars, which for that price, you have an insane 4K video photo shooting hybrid machine beast of a camera, and that is awesome. And because it's old, no one really wants it, you can get your hands on it for a really good price. So that is even more value to be had. So in conclusion, the GH4, it's absolutely worth it in 2021, and it's absolutely worth it in 2022 or 23 or 24. I can see this camera being useful to someone for the next 5 years, because let's be honest, cameras aren't improving that much, and it's all about the skill. There are some people who still shoot on GH3s and 70Ds and create work that is way better than anything I've ever made. This camera is definitely enough. And while I will continue to be a camera whore and constantly change camera brands and options like I am doing exactly right now, I know that this camera is definitely enough, even in 2021. I'm gonna end this video off here. Thank you guys so much for watching. See you guys next time.